Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Mute, and I'm the Deputy Head of the UN Network on Migration Secretariat. Very pleased to welcome you all today to our VNR Lab on Migration as part of the 2021 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. We do have an hour and a half today, and we have a very robust agenda. So I will turn us over right to it, and I will be chiming in to help ensure a continuous flow of this virtual platform. So thanks again for your participation with this. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Rabab Fatima, Her Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Bangladesh to the UN. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you. I thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, Director General Vitorino, distinguished colleagues, good evening from Dhaka, good morning, good afternoon to colleagues in Geneva and New York. On behalf of the co-chairs of the Friends of Migration, Bangladesh, Benin, Ireland, and Mexico, I have the honor to welcome you all to this VNR Lab on migration. We are very pleased to have with us today Mr. Vitorino, Director General of IOM and Coordinator of the UN Network on Migration. I take this opportunity to commend your leadership, Mr. Director General, and to extend our deep appreciation to all IOM staff on the front line for their courage and commitment and their invaluable work during this unprecedented pandemic crisis for migrants globally. And our deep tribute also to all migrants organizations for their dedicated work. Thank you very much. The objective of today's lab is to highlight the good practices in addressing migration-related issues in VNRs, as well as identifying priorities for the first IMRF to be held in 2022. And we're extremely pleased to have with us a very rich panel of experts to share their views. Director General, Excellencies, dear colleagues, the contribution of migrants to the socio-economic progress of their host countries, as well as the countries of origin, is well recognized. The 2030 Agenda has at least 10 targets pertaining to international migration, migrants, and mobility. The Global Compact on Migration and its 23 objectives also establish clear linkages to the 2030 Agenda. Yet, we are still far from achieving these targets and objectives. The Secretary General's report this year on SDGs progress, as well as his report on international migration and development, provide a sobering picture. Amid strict COVID-19 mobility restrictions, migrants globally have been particularly hard hit. Thousands of migrants have perished along the migratory journey, and they are disproportionately impacted to a growing trend of discrimination and xenophobia, unemployment, restrictions from movements, and the threat of forced return. Against this backdrop, the first International Migration Review Forum, to be held in 2022, provides us with a good opportunity to take stock of where things stand and coordinate actions at national and regional levels, as well as among key global stakeholders, to chart out an ambitious roadmap in line with the 2030 Agenda and the GCM. Allow me now to share a few specific points in this regard. First, we must tap into the true potentials of migration while building back better from COVID-19 pandemic. Migrants are not part of the problem. They're part of the solutions to this crisis. During this pandemic, migrants have been the frontline contributors as doctors, health professionals, and caregivers in their communities. Therefore, we need to ensure more innovative approaches to international cooperation in migration governance to remove barriers to safe, orderly, and regular migration. Secondly, it is critical to increase national capacities of major migrant-sending countries. We need enhanced partnerships in the areas of skills development, capacity building, facilitating fair and ethical recruitment, safeguarding decent work of migrants, addressing vulnerability of migrants, and promoting faster, safer, and cheaper transfer of remittances, among others. The pandemic has had a drastic impact on migrant workers and global remittances flow. Many remittance receiving households were forced into poverty and economic hardship. It is imperative to support the migrant workers during this crisis and help integrate them better in the post post-COVID job market. We look forward to hearing from our experts of some VNR presenting countries in this regard. Bangladesh submitted its last VNR in 2020, last year, where migration issues have been adequately reflected. We are pursuing a whole-of-society approach for implementing the GCM to help migrant workers integrate with the post-COVID job market. And this is from this commitment that we joined the Champions Initiative launched by the Network of Migration. Excellencies, third, the international community should endeavor to further integrate migrants and mobile populations into the global development discourse. We need to narrow down the sharp political divides across different aspects of migration. We appreciate the efforts of the Friends of Migration, Network of Migration, and other like-minded groups to put sharper focus on migration issues during the current cycle of negotiations of the HLPF Ministerial Declaration. We are now preparing for the negotiations of the outcome document of the LDC 5 conference, which will be held in January 2022. And this is a process that I'm co-chairing with the permanent representative of Canada. Migration and remittances remain one of the priority issues for the LDCs. Many of them are highly dependent on remittances as a key source of their external financing. We are trying to put the clear focus of that in the LDC outcome, and we wish to see strong support from all partners in this regard. Finally, Madam Moderator, it is imperative to foster global solidarity to address gaps in migrants' protection. The need of the hour is to ensure the access of migrants to vaccines. We need strong political will to ensure the rights, well-being, and dignity of migrants during this unprecedented crisis and beyond. Distinguished colleagues, Mr. Director General, Madam Moderator, I thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to a productive session. The Group of Friends on Migration stands committed to working closely with you all in taking forward our joint endeavors to maximize the full potentials of international migration for the benefits of migrants, their families, the home and host countries. I shall rest it here. Over to you, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Antonio Vitorino, the Director General of IOM and the UN Network on Migration Coordinator. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues. As coordinator of the UN Migration Network, it is my pleasure to be with you today for this VNR Lab on migration, dedicated, as Madam Ambassador has already mentioned, to identify good practices and innovative approaches in addressing migration-related issues and the challenges that we have in front of us in voluntary national reviews. Let me start by thanking very much the very good collaboration with the Group of Friends on Migration in organizing this event, and a special thanks to Ambassador Rabab Fatima that is in Bangladesh, so quite late for her, and I appreciate very much her presence. This lab, held within the context of the 2021 HLPF, could not be timelier. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated, as it was mentioned by Madam Ambassador, the vital role that migrants and people on the move play in fostering healthy, prosperous and inclusive societies. But at the same time, I believe that the pandemic has revealed weaknesses in some of our existing policies and practices. It has also exposed the devastating consequences that can result when people on the move are not adequately protected and their human and labor rights not fully respected. Including migrants in national vaccination plans is, I believe, a sine qua non for recovering from the crisis. And unfortunately, from a survey that we have organized, out of 180 countries, we still have to register that in 55 of them, Migrants face obstacles and challenges in being fully included in the vaccination plans. Ensuring that these lessons inform our future action is essential to recovering better from the pandemic and to building an inclusive and effective path for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda in the context of the decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. It is worth mentioning that during 2020, while foreign direct investment for low and middle income countries has dropped by 30% compared to 2019, the remittances from migrants to countries of origin has only decreased by 2.7%. Yes, it is a decrease, but this shows the commitment and the engagement of migrants to support the development of their countries of origin, and unfortunately, we are still far from the target of the Agenda 2030 of reducing the fees that are associated with remittance from migrants. Strengthened migration governance will contribute, I believe, to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda. This applies to all SDGs, and this is a very important point, especially to all under review at the current year HLPF. I mentioned poverty alleviation, SDG 1, no hunger, SDG 2, and it is very disturbing to know that the food insecurity is rising a little bit all over the planet. Good health and well-being, SDG 3, and the pandemic is there to show how relevant this is. Decent work and economic growth, SDG 8. Reduce inequalities, SDG 10. Responsible consumption and production, SDG 12. Climate action, SDG 13. And we know how many people are displaced because of climate change today already. Peace, justice, and strong institutions, SDG 16, and last but not least, SDG 17 about partnerships. As Madam Ambassador has mentioned today, we will assess how the VNR process can help to examine the status of implementation of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration ahead of the key moment that will be next year's International Migration Review Forum. And we are already preparing the forum, and in the next few days I will contact the new President of the General Assembly to make available all the support of the UN Migration Network in relation to the preparation of the IMRF. Ladies and gentlemen, a cursory review of the 43 VNRs presented this year shows a great variability in the treatment of migration. Some VNRs lack data on key migration-related targets, such as SDG 8.8, SDG 10.7, and SDG 10.c. Disaggregated data are very relevant because they allow us to compare outcomes for migrants with those of non-migrants. Unfortunately, few VNRs analyze data in a disaggregated way by migratory status, although I believe opportunities to do so exist and we should use them. One clear message from this year's HLPF is therefore that we need to pay greater attention to data. Objective 1 of the Global Compact on Migration lists a number of concrete actions in this respect. And at the IMRF next year, I look forward to hearing about the progress that countries have made in collecting and analyzing disaggregated data referring to migration. The UN Network on Migration assists member states in integrating migration considerations across the 2030 Agenda and in aligning the implementation of the Global Compact with the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This includes, for example, organizing trainings for UN country teams, and the issuance of a GCM implementation guide for governments and stakeholders in general. Outcomes from this VNR Lab will help the network, will help us to better assist you, member states, in implementing, following up, and reviewing the Global Compact on Migration, and in ensuring that safe, orderly, and regular migration contributes to positive development outcomes for all. And therefore, I look forward to the exchanges of good practices which are sure to result from this lab. From our side, we are ready to strengthen the incorporation of migration-related issues within VNRs to ensure really that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vitorino, for that. And thank you again to Ambassador Fatima as well for both of you joining us today. I may ask if you can both just press on the blue done speaking button on your bottom right. And I'm very pleased to introduce already the moderator of panel 1 on integrating migration in VNRs, Ms. Manuela Tomei, the Director of Conditions of Work and Equality Department of ILO. Please, Ms. Tomei.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emmy, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends. I have the honor to moderate this first panel, which deals with the very important issue of how to ensure that migrants are well integrated into responses supporting the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals in voluntary national reviews, and what progress has been made in delivering against the commitments of the 2030 Agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in a very different moment in time. We could have not anticipated that the most devastating pandemic of the past 100 years would occur and that so many gains would be lost. As we are 18 months into the crisis, a key question is how has the crisis affected our progress and what lessons can we draw that can inform the way forward? Migrants with the work and talents support societies and economies, and the money that they send home helps improve the lives of children and communities. However, as Ambassador Fatima and the DG Vitorino have stressed, the COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed the cracks in migration governance that leaves many migrants, particularly migrant workers, in very vulnerable situations. ILO data released this month underscores that nearly 70% of all migrants are labor migrants, and too many countries continue to be recruited through unfair recruitment practices, employed in workplaces that do not offer decent work. And ILO has found that migrant workers can earn as 40% less than what nationals earn in some countries, and women pay an extra penalty. If we are to make commitments like those under review during this high-level political forum, SDG 8.8 and 10.0 related to migrant workers and migration, we need to curb these inequalities. And the panel today will certainly provide us with very important insights into how they are tackling these issues and what more needs to be done. If you have any questions for the panelists, please put them in the chat and we will address them after the panelists have all spoken. As time is short, I would like to turn to the first speaker, Mr. Umar Al-Farouk Yunus, the head of the Division for Refugees and Migrant-Related Questions of Chad. I understand that Mr. Farouk will speak in French. Mr. Farouk, please go ahead in sharing the experiences of Chad in integrating migration into your voluntary national reviews.
Bonsoir à tout le monde. Merci de m'avoir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the floor. Excellency, Mr. Vitorino, Excellency, Madam Ambassador, Representative of Bangladesh, dear participants. We are aware of the cross-cutting nature and the importance of migration for our development. And for that reason, Chad as a country is committed to strengthening its legal and institutional framework for migration management in line with target 10.7 of the SDGs, which is to facilitate orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration. In 2018, a Directorate of Chadians Abroad, Consular Affairs, Refugees and Migration Issues was created within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order to deal with migration issues, and in particular by fighting against irregular migration and by raising awareness as to the importance of orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration. This directorate is now working together with the National Commission for the Welcome and Reintegration of Refugees and Repatriates, which we created in 2011. Following the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration in 2018, various actions have been carried out to facilitate the orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration to Chad. One, in 2019, with the technical support of several partners, we organized a national consultation in order to adapt the Global Compact to our specific situation here and to develop also an action plan. In November 2020, Chad held the voluntary national review of the Global Compact for migration with the support of the UN Migration Network. The month after, in December 2020, Chad adopted an asylum law that confirms socio-economic rights and allows asylum seeker to obtain official documents which allows them for inclusion or further inclusion in Chad. In February 2021, a decree was signed to establish the first national commission to combat trafficking in Chad. A multi-sectoral technical committee has also been officially installed on July 1st, 2021. Finally, with the support of our partners, we are carrying various actions aimed at better understanding the dynamics of remittances and at mobilizing our diaspora for the development of the country. The results we have achieved in recent years show the importance of integrating migration issues into development program and plans, including the 2030 agenda. With the support of our technical and financial partners, Chad continues to strengthen its action to this effect in order to better benefit from its migration, including the diaspora. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour ces mots et pour partager l'expérience de Tchad. Miss Maria Fernanda Ceballos, she's the director of protection at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility of Ecuador. I understand that Ms. Ceballos has a PowerPoint presentation to show. Ms. Ceballos, the floor is yours.
I just may ask Mr. Ceballos to please click on the bottom right screen. There's a blue button that's called Request to Speak, and that way we can add you to the virtual floor quickly. I do see that she is online.
Ms. Ceballos, could you please press the button Request to Speak, and after that you can turn off your camera and unmute you, so that we will be able to see you and hear you. Ms. Ceballos, I don't know if you have heard me, if you can hear me. So perhaps what I will do, Ms. Ceballos, is while we try to fix the problem, I may give the time the floor, to Mr. Omar Castañeda, who is the Deputy Permanent Representative of Guatemala, to share Guatemala's experience. And after Mr. Castañeda will have spoken, I will go back to you, Ms. Ceballos. So, Mr. Castañeda, the floor is yours, please.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Yes, thank you. Well, thank you. I will turn to my mother tongue, Spanish, right now, and thank you for introducing me. Para Guatemala es indispensable dar una respuesta integral, coordinada y corresponsable a la migración, a fin de garantizar flujos migratorios seguros, ordenados y regulares, en pleno respeto a los derechos humanos de las personas migrantes, sin importar su condición migratoria, con especial atención en los grupos más vulnerables como las niñas, los niños y adolescentes migrantes no acompañados y acompañados, unidades familiares, personas de la tercera edad, entre otros grupos. Para Guatemala también es de igual importancia reconocer los vínculos positivos que trae consigo la migración desde todos los ámbitos y principalmente su valiosa contribución al desarrollo económico de todos los países. Los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible y el Pacto Mundial para la Migración Segura, Ordenada y Regular son, desde nuestra perspectiva nacional, importantes herramientas que contribuyen significativamente a la gobernanza de la migración, con base en principios rectores que permiten abordar el tema migratorio desde todos sus enfoques. Los avances en el logro de las metas de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, ODS, y la Agenda 2030, específicamente en temas relacionados con la migración, son de primordial importancia para Guatemala, tomando en cuenta que
regards the Agenda 2020, this is of primary importance for Guatemala. Well, the advancements as regards goals in terms of social inclusion and the 2030 agenda means that these are of vital importance for Guatemala. So, taking into account the fact that for the government of our country, they're all fundamentally important parameters, and we have to really address these migratory flows as one of the principal axes of our program.
Sorry, Mr. Castaneda, we have indeed some problems in hearing you well. I mean, your voice comes out a bit staggered.
Lo siento, tenemos algunos problemas a la hora.
I hope you can hear me now. But I can continue with my presentation if you don't mind. Okay, thank you. I will come back into Spanish.
So, I'm going to dive back into Spanish. As regards the objective in number 8.1, the Sustainable Development Objectives, the government of Guatemala does provide attention and services to migrant Guatemalans and to anyone who's a migrant in Guatemala, so as to make sure that they're able to partake in all activities, and so as that they can look for better and more developed opportunities, so as to be able to, again, comply with a safe migration policy. We do feel that it's very necessary to continue to carry out important work with the goal of taking these important steps when it comes to migrant workers. So the Guatemalans and citizens first off, do have job opportunities in foreign countries, but they can do so safe in the knowledge that they can come back to their host country and promote thereby circular migration flows and avoiding brain drain in our country. Guatemala is running a nationally active campaign so as to be able to make sure that recruitment is safe, urging the population to ask and to ensure that their recruitment opportunities are genuine, and so as to basically foil any scams that they might fall prey to when looking for recruitment abroad. On the other hand, Guatemala also recognises the positive links that migration brings from all its different aspects, specifically its very valuable contribution to the economic development of many countries. We know that remittance payments are very important. In 2020, they actually accounted for 14.6% of our GBP. And we know that there's a very strong link between communities of migrant people in countries of origin and destination countries. And we know that there are families who work tirelessly so as to take care of their beloved family members, even though they do so from a distance. And so they continue to do so to build up savings. And they're able to do so accessing new developments in financial technology. As a medium income country, we do recognise that there are some vulnerabilities when it comes to dealing with problems that actually affect medium income countries. And so we do feel that it is really important to work on platforms so as to be able to deal with remittances in a safer way and in a quicker way, in compliance with Objective 20 of the Global Compact on Safe, Regular and Orderly Migration, as well as the reducing of costs of remittance services at least 3% less, in compliance with the Objective 10.6 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we would like to conclude saying that migration is so important, as are the creation of programs that link up origin and destination countries for development and for the 2030 agenda. We know that the current health emergency of COVID-19 means that we have to redouble our efforts so as to ensure the protection of people and migratory flows. And we reiterate our commitment so as to continue onwards with all efforts necessary so as to better the situation of migrant people and that of their families.
Mr. Castaneda, for indeed this very comprehensive approach, which tries to address the root causes of migration and at the same time working on how to extend the provision of services to migrant workers in countries of destination, while also combating fraudulent practices in the recruitment industry. Thank you very much. I'm wondering if Ecuador is now ready to speak, or whether we should move to the next speaker from Iraq. I don't know if Ms. Ceballos can hear me. Ms. Ceballos, may I remind you that in order to be able to be seen and heard, you have to press the button request to speak, and then you have to unmute yourself and turn your camera off. I can't hear you, right? I think Amy is actually nodding, so I will just move then to Iraq. We are migrating to Iraq, and Mr. Ismail Khalid Dahash is the deputy chairman of the Organization and Government Liaison Department Office of the Minister in the Ministry of Migration and Displacement. Mr. Dahash, what was the experience of Iraq in its voluntary national review process? The floor is yours, Mr. Dahash.
مساء الخير جميعا سيدات والسادة الحضور.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency the Ambassador, Director General, dear colleagues, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about this important issue represented in the Sustainable Development Goals. I am in charge of the Global Compact in the Ministry of Migration in order to ensure a safe, orderly, and regular migration. Our esteemed minister announced that Iraq joined the Global Compact on Migration in last February, and this is how we managed to participate in this important discussion. When it comes to the VNRs, we set a national strategy to manage migration. This national strategy is our own plan in order to implement the Global Compact for Migration. It was formulated by the technical joint team between the different Iraqi ministries. It was also approved by the Minister of Migration in October 2020. This strategy supports our national development goals related to migration and VNRs. It reiterates the importance of achieving our goals related to migration and displacement. It was not very hard to include the Global Compact in our VNRs. We have a very clear plan that we set it out to achieve our own development goals. It includes a schedule and a summary in addition to priorities to achieve the 2030 development goals. The national strategy to manage migration and the VNRs are used by the entire government in order to ensure the implementation of the Global Compact, of course, with the help of the different teams from the Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Migration, and other ministries. We all work together in order to develop our national strategy to manage migration and to protect migrants. Thank you very much.
Mr. Dahash, for indeed highlighting how important and how relatively easy was establishing a link between your national strategy on migration and voluntary national reviews, and the importance of this interagency and whole of government approach to implement the national strategy on migration. I would like to thank all our panelists for this first round of presentations. We have still a few minutes in order to take a number of questions. I do not see any questions on the chat for the time being. So I would like to take this opportunity for asking some questions. So I will take advantage of my role as moderator to ask you, to all of the panelists, the same question, which is how significantly has the COVID-19 pandemic crisis affected progress in the implementation of your national strategies and policies on migration or in support of refugees, and which are some of the lessons learned that indeed you think can help us in moving forward. Shall we start with the representative from Chad, please? Mr. Al Farouk? Are you still connected with us? Same rules as before. In order to speak and be heard, you need to press the button request to speak and then to unmute yourself. Chad does not seem to be with us. May I then move to Mr. Castaneda? Please, Mr. Castaneda. So what has been the impact of the pandemic on the implementation of your policies and programs, and what are the lessons learned? Mr. Castaneda, you need to press, yes, excellent.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
You have to press the, yes, great.
It's already, I can hear, I can.
We seem to have lost Mr. Castaneda as well. Mr. Castaneda, are you back with us?
I'm here, but you cannot listen to me.
Now I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now, perfectly.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I will respond in English better, so I think it will be the response will be my direct. First of all, as you said, we have been facing a lot of challenges now, and particularly during this pandemic. However, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala has strengthened all its capacity with the different consular offices everywhere, particularly in the United States and also in Mexico. So we are providing shelter, assistance, and also providing more integrative strategies with all the migrants that are going particularly to North America. As indicated previously, we do believe it is important to protect the human rights of the migrants. This is the main topic or the main aspect that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala is doing right now, taking into account, of course, our internal laws, our constitution prioritizes the human life, and particularly the migrants that are going through Guatemala and are going also to other countries have to be protected. It has not been an easy task due to the several limitations that we have had, and particularly to the movements. However, in our different consular offices, many of the assistants, not only with the training, with the capacity, but also with the staff, they are trying to provide all the different assistance that migrants need in this context. Certainly, something that I also like to raise right now during this conversation is that, for example, for many For many countries in the global south, and particularly for many countries, middle-income countries, there is a need right now for a better access to the vaccines. And that is something that we are requesting, not only in this forum, but also in other several forums, the access to the vaccines in order to really provide a safer environment, not only for migrants, but also for other populations. It's of a particular priority for us right now in the government and in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. So I think with this, I can contribute a little bit more with your question, and thank you very much again for organizing this VNR Lab. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castaneda. There is one question actually that appear in the chat. And I will ask the question. This is addressed to any of the panelists that have been with us. And after, this question, we will have to give the floor to the next panel. Would it be possible for the panelists to say something about the sources that they use in compiling the information in migration in order to indeed develop policies, programs in support of migration? Do you, for instance, use the population census data? Do you use household surveys? We would I don't know whether there is any of the panelists that would like to respond to these questions. As the DG Vitorino said, data is extremely important because this can indeed guide and inform our action and also help assess the effectiveness of our intervention. I don't know whether any of our, besides Mr. Castaneda, that I have, that has already...
Alors, et pour répondre à la deuxième question, qui est relative à l'utilisation des sources.
Answer to your second question, Chad is using the national sources that are produced by the National Service and by the IOM as well, because we are working in partnership with the IOM as well as with the System Agency of the United Nations in charge with migration. So the Chad is working with this institution from the UN, as well as national sources that are produced by the state services or government services called the INSED. I would like to go back to the first question in relation with the COVID-19 crisis. We can say that the focus was really on the pandemics, which led to a delay in the implementation of the priority action plan that we drafted in 2019. But with the help of the IOM in 2020, we've been able to launch our first VNR. And right now we are implementing the different committees in charge with the migration issues.
Thank you very much for these important pieces of information. I understand now that our speaker from Ecuador would be in a position to take the floor. Is this correct? Ms. Ceballos, are you online? Ms. Ceballos, you have to press the button for the request of assistance. Very good. We can see you. I hope we will be able to hear you as well.
Buenos días.
Please go ahead.
Buenos días con todos y con.
Good day to everyone. I'd first off like to just confirm that you can hear me okay? You can hear me okay, right?
Yes, so I'm addressing myself to Amy for help in this regard.
Certainly, and I'm checking with Ben, who should have the point and be able to see if we could share the screen for this. Ben? Okay.
PowerPoint for this. If someone can email to me, I can share straight away, or if someone can upload it to the documents, possibly.
Will do.
Sí, sí lo enviamos, pero si
We did send it by email, but if it's not possible to share the PowerPoint at this time, well, that's not really an issue. I can just comment on Ecuador's experiences. Well, first off, I'd like to apologise about the technical problems that I've experienced this afternoon, and I would like to extend cordial greeting to you all from Ecuador. I'd like to speak to you about international protection, how we've been able to generate a response within the framework of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's really important for us to let you know what our normative context is. We have an organic law for human mobility, one of the articles of which contemplates international protection. Ecuador is the Latin American country that's most recognised people as protected people. We have more than 71,000 people recognised in this status, many of them of Colombian nationals, and then we have had Venezuelan nationals, obviously, that have recently joined that group of people, as well as other foreign nationals that Ecuador welcomes onto its national territory. We've moved on to electronic e-visas, which has been an important step forward, which allows these people to have this important document, which basically documents their migration situation on their mobile phones. It's a document that is sent to them via email. They can download it, they can print it as many times as they require. And it's also really important to let you know that in terms of international protection, we don't just work on the immediate urgent situation, which is guaranteeing access to this procedure for people who ask for international protection, but also to incorporate this into 4 forms: the registration, the family inclusion, the family regrouping for recognised refugees, and the other form for people who are out with that process. And then we have the diversity of sexes. And so we have a system which is called Progress V4, which is a system that the UNHCR works with in certain countries, and we are now thinking that with Ecuador's experiences on board, this system can be updated with the sex gender diversity element, and we think that this is really important so that decision makers can have a solid framework from which they can generate public policies for the migrant population that's migrating to their country. I think that important step forward in terms of migration enabled us to get acknowledgement from the OAE as regards the inclusion of this particular element, and we have a single portal, a one-stop shop for all of the different procedures. That means that anyone that's on Ecuadorian territory can access this portal so as to have their status determined as being a refugee or not. And this is an important tool, especially in times of COVID, because it's enabled us to be able to deal with more than 29,000 applications that have come to us through this medium. At the same time, we also have the opening of some of our offices where we've been able to obviously continue to respect health security measures, but we've left this channel open still for people. And as regards the organic law for human mobility, we also established that people who have a temporary or permanent residence would be able to have a national ID card, cédula de identidad it's called, and this is given to people who are identified as being refugees, and this is the same identity card or cédula that all Ecuadorian nationals use. This is basically the summary of my presentation, and I'm available for any questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was really a very, very interesting presentation. I'm quite impressed with how you are using technology with a view to facilitating and streamlining procedures concerning requests for visas or also requests for asylum seeking. So this is quite impressive. It's really part of innovative approaches and how to maximize the use of the technological progress. I think that unfortunately we do not have more time to continue this very interesting debate. We have reached the end of our first panel. I would really like to thank all the panelists for their insights and commitment. I think that what the panel has clearly shown is that while obviously because of the pandemic there has been in all the countries that we have heard about a greater emphasis provided to strengthening support services and also integrated support services to migrant workers. At the same time, they have continued to invest in reviewing, in revisiting, strengthening their legal frameworks or national strategies or policies with a view to improving and ensuring a safer, orderly and regular migration. And also all of the panelists have somehow made reference to the importance of indeed taking into account the specific circumstances and addressing the specific needs and circumstances of those migrants who are in greater vulnerable positions. This was the case mentioned by Chad, by Ecuador, by Guatemala. So really, I mean, I think it has really been a very, very insightful discussion, and I will now give the floor over to Amy to continue the discussion. Thank you very much again for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Tamay. Thank you, colleagues, very much for this first panel. I'll ask you all to hit the done speaking button on the bottom right corner of your screen. And thank you once again. With that, I will ask our second panel to join to please hit the request to speak button. Mr. George Conway, the moderator of panel 2 on our multi-stakeholder panel from the HLPF to the IMRF. He's the Deputy Director of the Crisis Bureau of UNDP. And let me take the moment to also invite the panelists here, Ms. Ruiz, Mr. Tata, Ms. Crowley, and Ms. Kern to also press the request to speak, and we'll bring you onto the virtual floor as we have capacity here. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but we are able to go an extra 10 minutes over until about 8:40 for this entire event. So just to inform the panelists that as well, and also to keep in mind that there are 2 closing speakers right after. Thank you. Mr. Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Amy. And good day, colleagues, distinguished guests and participants. It really is an honor to be here with you today to take stock of the progress on migration-related targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, and to reflect on good practices and innovative approaches to ensure that migration needs are addressed as part of SDG implementation. UNDP, my organization, we support many countries in the preparation of VNRs, and it is important that the contributions of migrants to sustainable development are well recognized in those processes. Having heard from the experiences of countries in integrating migration into the VNRs, we will now hear from a range of key stakeholder groups who will provide their perspectives on how the Global Compact on Migration has been implemented and how it has contributed to progress on the SDGs. We're very privileged today to have an illustrious and diverse panel with us, and I'll welcome them individually first. First, we have Ms. Ida Ruiz, who is a General Director of the Oaxacan Migrant Care Institute from Oaxaca, Mexico. Second, we have Mr. Srinivas Tata, Director of the Social Development Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Next, we have Ms. Ellen Percy Crowley, the William R. Kennan Professor of Geography at Colgate University. And finally, we have Ms. Cecily Kern, Global Policy and Research Advocate for Mercy International Association, Mercy Global Action. Distinguished panelists, thank you for being with us here today. I would like to read out to you the 5 guiding questions that have been provided and request each of you within your 5 minutes to share your perspectives on 1 or 2 of the questions as raised. First, how do you think migration-related targets of the SDGs are progressing? And in particular, SDG 8.8 on ensuring labor rights are safe and secure working conditions for migrant workers, SDG 10.7 on facilitating orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration, and SDG 10.c on reducing the transaction costs of remittances. The second question is, from your experience, have migration and remittance considerations across the other 8 SDGs been reviewed by the 2021 HLPF? And further, what is the impact of COVID-19 on migration and remittance flows in your understanding and experience? The third question, what sources of qualitative and quantitative information on migration-related issues, including remittances, are available? And how can the quantity, quality, and use of these sources of information be improved? Fourth question, what role did or can the GCM play in preparing the VNRs? And what role did or can the GCM play in the regional fora on sustainable development, the so-called RFSDs? How can future HLPFs take into account the result of the IMRF? And how can stakeholders, including civil society, academia, and local governments, best contribute to the preparation of the VNRs? The final question, how can the VNRs contribute to assessing the status of implementation of the GCM? And how can countries link their VNRs with the GCM national implementation plans? Colleagues, again, a brief note for participants. For those who wish to engage in the Q&A, you're welcome to put your questions into the messages box, including which speaker you would address your question towards. And so without further ado, I'm very pleased to invite the panelists to take the floor. And first, very happy to welcome Ms. Ida Ruiz. Ms. Ruiz, you have 5 minutes. Over to you, please.
Saludo respetuosamente a quienes nos acompañan.
Greetings to you all, to all participants in this political forum, this high-level political forum about Sustainable Development 2021. Concerning the achievements from Oaxaca State related to the SDGs in terms of labor, I have to say that the lack of employment or the willing to have better opportunities in terms of labor represents one of the main reasons why some people decide to migrate to other parts from the world. In this sense, Mexico, and especially Oaxaca, has a labor force very important in other countries. Our government, by Maestro Alejandro Muravio Hinojosa, has signed several agreements with the National Employment Service in order to assist migrant people with actions for economic development and in terms of working conditions. Also, with the welfare secretary, migrants people got job in Oaxaca State while they are in transit. And we also have an agreement, and we give migrant workers the possibility to attend to some workshops and trainings in order to include them in the labor market. This way, we generate opportunities according to their specific profile and for different economic sectors in an efficient, very efficient way. We also do pre-selection. We link them to the professional market, and we do a follow-up. Together with this national service, we organize work fairs, both face-to-face and virtual, in order to create a direct link and to increase the possibilities of migrant people who wish to return, or also for those who are in an emergency situation. It's very important also the permanent coordination with international bodies as OIM. We work with them, and in the last months we created a strategy to strengthen the migrant governance from the local perspective. This allows us to understand and to manage in a correct way migrations in Mexico and also in Oaxaca. Lastly, we have a relationship and communication with unions for food and trade sector. They help to negotiate salaries, they help to improve conditions, and also to get open permits with no cost for some, or to protect workers, migrant workers that suffer physical abuse or psychological abuse and also sexual abuse. So to respect and protect their rights and their welfare. In terms of the impact that migration and remittances had in the SDGs and also the impact of the pandemic in migrant flux and remittances, the remittances represents a fundamental part for the development and the economy in our country. Beyond the consequences of the pandemic, and although some forecasting from Mexico or for our region, we are committed to those communities. From January and December 2020, remittances for migrant community to the state got to almost $2,000 million, and it was an increase in 74 million, representing 4% of increase for the same period in 2019, when we got the registry. It was similar, but it was less. In 2020, there was a decrease in the remittances in our country. However, and thanks to the effort of our budgets, the situation changed. Numbers are clear enough, but the labor work in the American Union is a reflect of why remittances didn't decrease. We also have a culture of saving and family in our country. At a national level, the situation is the same with the data we gathered and published by the Banco de Mexico. In May 2022, we got more than 4,000 million, 31% more than last year. This represents that from January to May 2021, the country received a total amount of more than $19,000 million, which is an increase of 21% compared to the same period the year before. In terms of actions to reduce cost when doing remittances, the Banco de Mexico, also the Organization of Banks of Mexico, are working together so that migrant people can open an account in an easy way in Mexico, so that the resources that they send to their families they don't have to pay commission, and it's very quickly. This will allow that these resources are sent electronically, and people receiving this money will get it in the office, at their office in the bank. Apart, there are also telecom offices and other places where these remittances for social conditions get there. The only condition will be to have an account in this bank. These accounts can be opened remotely from the United States of America, or from any other part of the world. We only need a consular number or a passport number, which they can get easily. It's an official number, and they also need an email address. In terms of the source of quantitative and qualitative information, Banco de Mexico, which is the central bank in the country, also the government secretary, with a report they do every year. And specifically in Oaxaca, there's an institute, and they work together with the general direction to create a diagnosis for migration in our state, and we could document all statistics in terms of repatriated person, returned person, and studying also the situation of migrant people. Also, in coordination with the IOM, we consolidated in the last months a strategy to strengthen the governance in migrant issues at a local level, and this allows to understand and to manage in a proper way migrations in Mexico and also in Oaxaca, and creating a legacy for future administrations. In those areas we can improve, also increasing the support for our communities. This diagnosis for governance has the SDGs in mind, and also the global impact on migration. Also the GCM, because it represents an opportunity in history to improve international cooperation on migration, and also to strengthen the contributions from migrant people and migration to sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Ms. Ruiz, for your very insightful and good comments on the significant challenges, as well as the good work being done in progress in Oaxaca, in Mexico. So tremendous thanks for your comments. I'm now very pleased to invite Mr. Srinivas Tata to take the floor. Mr. Tata, you have 5 minutes, please.
Moderator, I will, in the interest of time and as urged by you, perhaps focus on 2 issues which are critical out of the 5 questions that you asked. Firstly, the extent to which migration-related targets of Sustainable Development Goals, the extent to which they have been addressed by member states in Asia Pacific, and also perhaps look at the extent to which the outcomes of the regional reviews, how they have been integrated into the Asia Pacific processes, Sustainable Development Forum, as well as VNR processes. Now, the Asia Pacific region reviewed the implementation of the GCM in the form of a GCM review, which was attended by more than 30 member states, along with the regional network on migration, which consists of more than 15 UN and affiliated agencies in March 2021. During this review, member states recognized the synergies between the GCM and 2030 agenda and noted that the SDGs would further the implementation of the GCM and vice versa. Beyond the SDG targets and indicators, the inclusion of migrants is inherent in the universal character of the 2030 agenda, and this was acknowledged by member states and noted that its overarching aim was to leave no one behind, especially migrants. Thus, migrants are included both as beneficiaries of development and as contributors to the achievement of the SDGs. In particular, member states in Asia Pacific prioritize GCM objectives closely related to SDGs 8.8, 10.3, and 10.7. Just a few examples. For example, regarding GCM Objective 5, which is closely related to SDG 8.8, Countries in our region have prioritized issuing work permits for migrant workers either seeking to live in or work within the countries or planning to go overseas. These permits are intended to provide protection and prevent irregular labor migration. For instance, at the end of 2018, the Philippines has partnered with Bahrain in the issuance of a flexible visa, acting as a work permit valid for 2 years, including health insurance and a return ticket at the end of the contract period or when the worker decided to return. Further, countries in Asia Pacific have signed and implemented bilateral memorandums of understanding as identified in GCM Objective 5 and closely related to SDG 8.8 and 10.7, which help protect nationals and provide safe routes of regular migration. For example, Nepal has signed bilateral labor agreements and MOUs with 9 destination countries, and Mongolia has adopted labor migration agreements with the Republic of Korea and Japan, which facilitate the opening up of regular migration pathways and protected employment for Mongolians overseas. In terms of reducing recruitment costs, Vietnam, for example, has issued the law on Vietnam guest workers 2020 to reduce recruitment fees. And Indonesia is working towards elimination of recruitment fees borne by its migrant workers by requiring employers and the government to cover placement costs. This policy has taken effect in 2021. In addition, countries in the region have also been working towards reduction of remittance costs. For instance, Bangladesh has been providing a 2% cash incentive to all remitters. In Philippines, the central bank, along with the Overseas Workers Welfare Association and BDO Foundation, have forged a partnership to improve financial inclusion and literacy of overseas financial workers. Further, Nepali migrant workers are required to have a bank account at home in order to formalize and streamline financial transactions. These are just a few examples, Mr. Moderator, on how the GCM objectives have supported the achievement of the related SDGs and vice versa. Now, just a few examples on how to take this forward in terms of aligning the GCM processes and the Sustainable Development Review processes. In Asia Pacific, after the conclusion of our review in March 2021, the chair of the intergovernmental meeting, which was Philippines, presented the outcome at the regional review of the regional review of the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Forum. And in addition, the stakeholders from the Asia Pacific Regional Review, which included a very large number of CSOs as well as migrant worker federations, also participated in the APFSD. Thus, in the Asia Pacific, we intend to closely link the GCM review to the review of the 2030 agenda to report on the synergies. SCAP is calling on all member states to include migration into annual reviews of the 2030 agenda in the Asia Pacific. Building on the synergies between the SDGs and the targets, future VNRs can provide an opportunity for member states to take stock of SDG implementation with the view of the implementation of the related GCM objectives. In preparing for VNR reporting, countries often hold consultations with stakeholders. And at these consultations, stakeholders active on migration, such as the 200 stakeholder groups which actively participated in the Asia Pacific Regional Review, could work closely with member states on GCM implementation. We have undertaken a mapping of SDGs and related GCM objectives, and this mapping could provide a template to report simultaneously on SDG and GCM implementation, and could also be included in regular CCAs and VNR reporting. So SCAP, in close collaboration with the UN Network on Migration, looks forward to using future regular reviews of the 2030 agenda to advance the implementation of the GCM and vice versa. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That's all from me for the time being.
Very good. And thank you, Mr. Tata, for that good elaboration of the work being done, the good work being done by SCAP together with member states in the Asia Pacific region. Good progress to be registered, and thank you for the update. I'd like to move now to welcome Ms. Ellen Percy-Crowley to take the floor. Ms. Crowley, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, esteemed colleagues. I've already learned a great deal from Ms. Raiz and Mr. Tata. I want to learn more. I'm Ellen Percy-Crowley, and I serve as chair of the Scientific Panel on International Migration, Strengthening the Knowledge Base for Policy of the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population. I offer with humility 3 contributions to this critical laboratory. First, when the voluntary national reports are placed in tandem with the regional review processes of the Global Compact, most recently in Latin America and also in the Asia Pacific. We observe creative synergies between the VNRs and steps toward the implementation of the objectives of the Global Compact. As noted by our colleague Bela Hovey, the Global Compact may be considered an elaboration of the goals for sustainable development in relationship to human migration, mobility, and also displacement. The voluntary national reviews for 2021 resonate with the regional implementation of the Global Compact. First, a whole of society perspective is often expressed. Note the voices of Thailand, Bangladesh, and Zimbabwe. Second, processes of progress and implementation are inclusive and participatory, just as Mr. Tata has described so beautifully. The review prepared by Chad makes this explicit, and the review by Colombia more implicitly. Third, the principle of evidence-based policies and programs regarding development and migration, respectively, is held in common between the VNR's process and the implementation of the Global Compact. Many VNRs emphasize transparency of access to data by stakeholders, including migrants, for example, Ecuador and Tunisia. My second point, assessing data regarding migration, mobility, and displacement is a growth industry within national statistical offices and international organizations. Work being conducted by the UN Statistical Commission and Division regarding statistics on international migration and on refugees and internally displaced persons, respectively, represents a significant dimension of progress, if only or if aspirational, in relationship to SDG 17.18, as well as Objective 1 of the Global Compact. Presently and in the near future, national census data are fundamental for the analysis of migration dynamics within, among, and between countries and over time. The UN Population Division notes that over 200 countries have census data or other administrative data sources by which to measure the national stock of international migrants. These data, too often underanalyzed, hold great potential to inform national and regional policy contributions of migrants to processes of sustainable development. Collaborative work between IOM's Global Migration Data Analysis Center and IPUMS International illustrates the potential for utilizing census data, in this case 2010 censuses, for monitoring progress toward selected STGs. The results of the 2020-21 rounds of censuses represent a critical moment for mining available census resources for purposes of national review. Consultative interventions to the Global Compact also revealed both governmental and non-governmental organizational appetites for understanding the causes, the drivers of migration and non-migration, and its consequences in relationship to sustainable development and human rights. Now is the time for a world migration survey to understand, with all the available tools of social and statistical sciences, the complexity of flows at the regional and global scales, as well as local scales. Our scientific panel of the IUSSP is advancing a model world migration survey to generate information on causes and consequences of migration by using common definitions and indicators to foster international and regional comparability of results, while also attending to national circumstances and policy priorities. Central actors of this initiative would be national statistical offices. My final observation is one of gratitude for the recognition within the national voluntary national reports, as well as the regional review process of the Global Compact, of the potential of academic and scientific communities to contribute. We stand ready to serve in providing technical resources, both human and intellectual, to foster validity and reliability of measurement, both quantitative and qualitative, of migration, its dynamics, its characteristics, its causes, and its potential contributions to sustainable development. And we seek to assist in effective communication of results. I know firsthand from my home institution of Colgate that current generations of university students, both undergraduate and graduate, are committed to being relevant, to use their skills to address problems of humanity and the environment, and they stand ready to assist in aspirations we share today. Our colleagues from Guatemala make this point most powerfully in their VNR, which I modify slightly for our common ground. Quote, "It is important to remember that as we move towards the decade of action, there is no way back. We must narrow the inequality gap and strengthen the statistical systems, build countries where no one is left behind and where rights and decent life can be guaranteed for the entire population." Thank you, sincerely. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks. And very much appreciate your comment today, as well as your broader efforts to ensure that our policy and programming on migration and sustainable development is grounded as best it can be in data, analytics, and evidence. So great, thanks for your contributions today. Glad that you're here with us. Colleagues, we have one final speaker for the second panel, and it's my very much pleasure to welcome Miss Cecily Kern. You're very welcome to take the floor. Madam, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway, and thank you so much to the organizers for the invitation. I serve as the Vice Chair of the NGO Committee on Migration, which is a member of the Civil Society Action Committee. And I think when we look at progress that's been made to the migration-related targets of the SDGs, one of the greatest examples of international ambition and commitment since 2015 has been the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration itself. Within 3 years of the adoption of the SDGs, states developed a cooperative framework that takes its name directly from SDG 10.7. And with its 23 objectives and 189 practical actions, the GCM is a menu of solutions that an overwhelming majority of states adopted to achieve in cooperation with each other and in partnership with other actors, including civil society. And it's important that we don't undervalue the significance of this progress. The GCM is a milestone in the field of migration, as well as for implementing the full range of SDGs, including those under review this year. In the GCM, states commit to eliminating the adverse drivers and structural factors that compel people to migrate, including through poverty eradication, food security, health and sanitation, decent work and inclusive economic growth, climate change, mitigation and adaptation, and of course, good governance, access to justice, protection of human rights, and the creation of inclusive societies. And also migrants are important contributors to positive development outcomes, and the Global Compact aims to leverage the potential of migration for the achievement of all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought most of the world to a standstill in the last 18 months as governments around the world have introduced measures to flatten the curve of infections, travel restrictions, border closures, the suspension of labor migration, and the return of migrant workers, and the slowing of migration processing and assistance to asylum seekers. And this fundamentally changed global human mobility. But the pandemic has also revealed that the Global Compact for Migration is more relevant and necessary than ever before. Issues of social inclusion, labor mobility, access to social protection systems, remittances, and non-discrimination have shown us that we need a conversation about the future of our economies and societies so that care workers, fruit pickers, doctors and nurses, small business owners, and all people on the move are recognized and valued for the contributions that they make, regardless of their country of origin or their migratory status. And there have been good practices implemented around the world to remove barriers and facilitate migrants' access to regular status, to remittance channels, social protection and basic services. governments have shown that they can make major changes to migration governance and systems when it benefited them during COVID-19. So now they need to make permanent, systemic, structural, and institutional reforms that continue beyond the pandemic if we're to achieve the migration-related SDGs. And in terms of review, because the SDGs are the mother of the GCM, and in turn the GCM was created to take forward the wide range of SDGs, it's important to recognize that we cannot achieve or evaluate progress of the SDGs without looking at what has been achieved or not in the GCM. To leave migrants and migration out of or behind in the review of the process or progress at the intersection of the GCM and the SDGs is to leave behind both a critical implementing framework as well as a key human and economic constituency in achieving top development objectives and opportunities at global, regional, and national levels. Civil society can best contribute to the preparation of VNRs by being and providing live, firsthand and unexaggerated evidence of concrete actions and solutions to achieve the SDGs. Many of these are directly in line with the actions contained in the GCM and are often funded with civil society's own financial and human resources and regularly accomplished and assessed in frontline partnership with states, local authorities, international organizations, and migrants and refugees. Already, the practice and product of the voluntary national reports in the regional GCM reviews with states and stakeholders since last October has contributed directly to the preparation of VNRs for the HLPF and for other development processes, including national and regional development planning. And in the substance, process, and politics, the GCM reviews have been reminders of strong convergence between both the GCM and the SDGs, structured opportunities for exchange of practices, builders of trust, and capacity and cooperation on solutions within and among states, and notably with civil society and other stakeholders. For the Europe and North America regional GCM review at the end of last year, civil society submitted 10 written reports or statements, many of which are interesting to compare with the VNRs from those same states. And as we move into the IMRF next year, global civil society has already begun to mobilize, and we will continue to engage with member states with an emphasis on solutions. We're not just advocates, we are partners in implementation at the front lines with migrants, and we're prepared to continue providing substantive inputs to the review of the GCM, and we trust that as member states prepare their voluntary national reports to the IMRF, they will take our contributions into account and focus on the gaps in national policies and emerging issues that we observe from the grassroots. We need support from member states to ensure that civil society participation in the IMRF is open and inclusive, to ensure real and effective opportunities for robust engagement. And just to close, this year's and future HLPFs should recognize not just the complementarity, but the synergy with the IMRF and other GCM review processes. The two streams are inextricably linked and should remain so in order to ensure efficiencies and coherence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kern, for your very wise comments. And I'd like to thank all of the speakers for the excellent presentations today. And we've heard across the various speakers that notwithstanding the impacts of COVID-19, which have been sizable, there's nonetheless been good multi-stakeholder initiatives that have helped leverage migrants' contributions in both countries of origin and destination on pathways towards the SDGs. And even with that, however, additional efforts to better integrate migrants and migration into SDG implementation efforts are absolutely necessary. And this implies a number of things, but it includes improving quantitative and qualitative data to better monitor progress in this area. Colleagues, with apologies, due to time limitations, we're not going to be able to do a Q&A from this particular panel. But thank you so much for your contributions, and I'll pass back over to Amy and the Secretariat to lead us into the closing of today's session. But great thanks for your contributions today, very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conway and panelists, and apologies again for running out of time. I do see that someone did post a question in the chat box, and if panelists wish, they can engage in a conversation in the chat box to answer that question. But as we close the panel, I will ask our final two speakers, Ms. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination and Interagency Affairs of UNDESA. If she can, great, she's on. And after her, then Mr. John Gilroy of the Permanent Mission of Ireland. But please, Ms. Spatalazzano, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Amy. I hope you can hear me well. Let me say, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a question. How could I do justice to the richness of the presentations we have just heard in 3 minutes, or even less now because we are late, of all these presentations? It's almost impossible. So I'll focus rather on what lies ahead of us. And I would say this year's HLPF is reviewing SDGs that are at the heart of the migration and development nexus. And the VNRs this year are excellent opportunities to demonstrate these linkages. Also, we are about to start our preparations, as it was mentioned, for the first International Migration Review Forum. And given that the Global Compact does not have a detailed accountability framework, we must look at the existing tools, in particular the SDG monitoring framework, to evaluate progress. Further, just as migrant workers played a critical role during the pandemic, they will be key to the sustainable and resilient recovery from COVID-19. And for this to happen, migrants, regardless of their status, must be included in national vaccination campaigns. Also, opportunities for migrant workers, including their ability to send remittances back home, must be restored. And I was pleased that during the informal consultations on the HLPF declaration, this reality was increasingly recognized. With these negotiations, delegations have laid the groundwork for the Progress Declaration to be adopted during the International Migration Review Forum. Dear colleagues, in reviewing the VNRs and in listening to the presentations today, I am struck not only by the great variety of national experiences, but also by the various approaches being used to analyze these experiences. So, this is my first takeaway message. In my view, the UN Network on Migration can play an active role in encouraging governments, first to include migration narratives in their VNRs, but also in this context to analyze quantitative indicators of progress. And the second takeaway message is about data. In presenting their VNRs, countries often refer to a lack of data. Yet, at the same time, countries are reporting a rich tapestry, I would say, of data to the global SDG indicators database. So I wonder, are we sufficiently exploiting the existing data? I think that the network can help to bring quantitative and qualitative reporting together. Perhaps in preparing for the first review forum, the network could analyze the migration-related indicators available from the global database, either as part of the Secretary General's report or separately. Then it would be useful to identify which migration-related indicators are not reported to the global database and to assist countries in filling those gaps. Lastly, let me draw your attention to the latest round of population censuses, many of which were scheduled for 2020 or 2021 and therefore had to be postponed due to the pandemic. As these census operations resume on a delayed schedule, countries may have the opportunity to strengthen their gathering of migration data, in line with the first objective of the Global Compact on Migration. Data statistic and population divisions, together with our network partners, stand ready to support you. In closing, let me recognize the wonderful support of our network partners, ILO, IOM, and UNDP, in organizing this event. I thank you for your attention.
And please, Mr. Gilroy, your closing remarks. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. We're nearly there, and I think we've had a really, really good event, and thanks to all involved. I'll keep this as brief as I can, but just to say that we're in a critical moment for so many of our common and interlinked agendas right now. The Paris Agreement, the SDGs, the GCM, they all must be progressed in a way where they will reinforce each other and contribute to a combined momentum. For years, we've been talking about the three dimensions of sustainable development, of global challenges needing global solutions. But now is the moment to realise this approach as we build back better and fairer from the current pandemic. Migration is deeply relevant to all three pillars of the UN's work, and we must continue working together to join the dots in New York, Geneva, and elsewhere in support of our common agenda. The HLPF was always envisaged as a docking station to allow member states and stakeholders learn from each other, not just about successes, but also failures. It's vital that we look at our structures critically. Bad news can often be more important than good. And what Director General Vitorino said at the outset about the global pandemic revealing weaknesses and systemic problems is therefore vital. We can't generate solutions if we don't know what the problem is. Today has been a really useful step forward in this regard, and I urge you all to reflect on our discussion and this year's HLPF more generally, so that in the remaining years of the 2030 Agenda, we can do a better job of more deeply integrating migration into the SDGs at the global and national levels. Sincere thanks to all our panelists for their excellent insights and testimony. Thank you again for joining us for today's event. On behalf of Bangladesh, Benin, Mexico, and Ireland as co-chairs of the Friends of Migration and our close partners from the UN Network on Migration. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilroy, and thanks very much to the Friends of Migration in New York for the excellent support that you provide on this issue continuously, and to our network colleagues as well. Thank you, participants, for joining us today. We will share more information about this event, including a link to the recording of this event with all who registered and participated. And in the meantime, I wish you a very good day and a very good evening to all. Good night.